You can only learn so much through a screen, but when you actually touch the artifacts, when you see the paintings in person, you get a better grasp of what life was like back in the day. So that's what we're going to do this week at the Merrill History and Cultural Center. Let's go. We're now inside the Merrill History and Cultural Center, and I'm with Pat Berg. Pat, how are you doing today?
I'm good. How are you, Dan?
I'm well, and I'm really astonished by this complex. Right as I walked in, I just thought it was beautiful. So tell me about the history of this place.
Well, thank you. We strive very hard to try to make a unique museum. The Northwoods is sort of known for a typical logging museum component, and when we acquired this property, our mission was to make it just a little bit different so people could get a different experience when they come through. We were gifted the Heritage Center, which is the old Swedish Bethlehem Lutheran Church, in 2006. They were down to about 13 families. Their pastor was retiring, and they just didn't see any hope of keeping that alive. So they donated the church to us. We purchased their parsonage and additional land here. And then around 2012, during a somewhat of a depressive financial time, we were able to get enough funds to build this wonderful addition on the back of the church, making the church handicapped accessible. So we put in a library. We're a split level. The church is split level, so we needed to do that. We were able to add a main exhibit room and a lovely component to the logging pinery, a library, document space. So refurbished the church in 2013, 2014. And now we think we have a beautiful complex. We just finished adding a storage addition and are in the process of locating everything under one campus here. So we're very lucky to have supportive foundations and supportive people in Merrill because they are our base. This addition that we're standing in here was about $1.4 million to put on and refurbish the church, and the storage addition next door is about $600,000 to $700,000. So that's a lot of buy-in from the community.
Yeah, that's impressive. And we're going to go to all these different exhibit rooms on our tour. But I do want to start with this photo over here. Do you mind if we walk over here? This is the first thing that caught my eye. Tell me about this photo.
Well, and the reason we put this kind of interesting photo in the lobby is that it does catch people's eye. This is actually a scene in Merrill. We are downtown on Main Street. People who are familiar with Merrill would recognize this possibly as now Ace Hardware and Merrill House of Music down the road. But you can see there's tons of activity going on, lots of people downtown. It is 1896. There's a Merrill Memorial Parade that was just finishing, and everybody's rushing downtown to go to the Opera House, which is right here on the second floor, for a program for Memorial Day. One of the cool things is dirt streets, wooden sidewalks. We have a trolley in the middle of this main street. It's only 1896. We had our trolley start in 1890, and one of the first electric trolleys in the state. Even Milwaukee at this time, I believe, still had horse-drawn trolleys. So because of our dams and our water power, we were able to make the electricity work for us.
Man, 1896.
Yes.
Well, we're going to continue our tour tomorrow on Up North at 4. We'll be right back after the break. We're back on Up North at 4, continuing our tour of the Merrill History and Cultural Center. Still with Pat Berg. Pat, let's just start. Can you explain what's in this room?
Sure, this is actually our main exhibit room, and we have a permanent Native American exhibit on one end, donated to us by the Ebert family from Presque Isle. In the middle of the room currently, we have an exhibit dedicated to Wisconsin Public Service and electricity. We have an exhibit on Page Milk Company, one of the first and largest evaporated milk producers in the United States, and a small exhibit on Merrill dairies.
When I walked in this room, this is the first thing that I really was gravitated to. I don't know what this is. What is this strange machine?
Well, it probably does look pretty unfamiliar to the younger people, but this is actually an early washing machine. Basically, the washing machines looked like this early on, and they had a crank where you would agitate your clothes, and then they produced to making it electric. So they added an electric motor on the underside, and there's an agitator in the middle that goes up and down and agitates your clothes, but then it leaves them sitting in a pot of water. So this interesting piece up here, you would have to take your clothes one by one, whatever your item is, run it through the rollers, and it crank this down. Your clothes would go through, squish all the water out, and then you could take your clothes over and hang them up on your clothesline, because there would be no electric dryer to take care of them. It's kind of an ingenious idea. It obviously evolved over the years into what we see, and now everything is contained in one unit. We don't have to worry about rolling our clothes out. They spin dry. This motor next to the machine would be for the farm wives who also wanted to partake in the excitement of having their own washing machine, but they wouldn't have electricity on the farm yet. So this motor actually was gas powered, and they could attach a belt to it and it would run the washing machine. So everybody could have clean laundry.
Even this seems like it would be a big hassle. I can't even imagine what they did before that.
Well, we have some wash tubs in the back with some washboards and some copper boiling containers.
You can see the whole process.
It was quite a process. They did use rollers pretty early on. Even when they washed clothes by hand, you would have sort of a wooden frame, and you'd have a tub on one side, a tub on the other, and they'd still run them through the wringer to get the water out. But many times they had to boil their own water to wash clothes, so it was pretty complicated.
When I hear the phrase going through the wringer, is it from that?
Yes, I can imagine that it probably did start there, because I'm sure there are lots of young children who can tell you about how they got their hands caught in the wringer, which I don't think would have been a pleasant experience.
No. Okay, well, we're going to continue our tour tomorrow. We'll be right back in Up North at 4. We're continuing our tour here in Up North at 4 of the Merrill History and Cultural Center. I'm with Bea Lieball. Bea, tell me about this room.
Okay. The Pinery tells the story of the very beginnings of Merrill, and like many, perhaps most of the cities in the northern part of Wisconsin, we started out with the lumbering business. And so we talk about the actual fact of lumbering, what it was like in the logging camps, and then what happened when the railroad came to town, and all of those things.
So this is what I wanted to focus on here in the Pinery. What are these sorts of hammers?
Okay, these are called log hammers, and we have quite a collection of them that covers the state of Wisconsin, but these were used locally. And what their purpose was to identify logs. Once the trees were cut down, all of the logs went to the same rivers. So we might have had 8 different companies, or 10 or 20, cutting logs at the same time, all of them putting logs into the river. Before they went in the river, though, they were stamped with one of these log hammers so that the logs could be identified and the companies could be paid for them. Very important. I mean, why cut logs if you're not going to be paid for them? So very important. And it was kind of like branding cattle. It's just the same idea.
I see an HM, I see CS, and then also there's just kind of some random symbols as well.
Well, if you know anything about the loggers here, Anson Gilkey, Stang, Scott, Heinemann, Matthews, these were the big companies in this area that were doing the logging.
Okay, thanks so much, Bea. We'll continue our tour tomorrow and Up North at 4. We'll be right back. We're back on Up North at 4. We're now inside the church that's part of the Merrill Historical and Cultural Center. Still here with Bea Lieball. And Bea, we have an exhibit behind us that pays homage to about a century ago. Tell us about that.
Right. We have in this room tried to cover many of the things that were popular in the 1920s. And of course, fashion is one thing we think about very readily when we think about the 20s, because we had come out of the Victorian era where skirts were long and necklines were high, and we ended up with skirts that were much shorter than that, much slimmer. The boyish look was in, but you have some beautiful examples in this area of some of the fashions that were worn at that time. This particular dress is a little bit different because it has hip interest. You can see it's almost like calling attention to the hips. That was right at the very end of the teen years and in the early 20s. But beading, and here are two gorgeous examples of beaded dresses, was very popular for evening wear for young women. And you can see the very slender line of these dresses. This dress was a wedding dress that was worn by the grandmother of one of our board members. It's just exquisite, and she very generously is loaning that to us for our exhibit. In the background, you can see some other clothing from the era as well.
Well, Bea, we're just scratching the surface in this room. There's a lot of other things from the 1920s. I see glass bottles. There are sports equipment back there. But we're going to have to call it for today. Thanks so much, Bea. We'll be right back in Up North at 4. We're back on Up North at 4 here at the Merrill History and Cultural Center. We're on our final stop inside the SS Merrill Reference Library Room with Tom Berg. Tom, how are you doing?
I'm doing great. Thanks for being in Merrill today, Dan.
Of course. I love this museum. Tell me about our final room here. What's in this room?
Well, we established a railroad reference library for the many people that are interested in railroad history of various sorts. Also, model railroaders. Wisconsin is very strong on model railroading in the community of the Northwoods. It is called the SS Merrill Railroad Reference Library because SS Merrill is the namesake for the city. He was the general manager of the Chicago, Milwaukee, and St. Paul Railway that bought the Wisconsin Valley Railroad just as it was arriving in Jenny, as it was called then, in 1880. And the railroad is, of course, so important to Merrill's history to be able to get its lumber products out. So we, with donations from a whole variety of people, railroad clubs, even the Kalmbach Company, which publishes Trains and Model Railroader, we have established a railroad library of some 700 books, complete copies of all of the journals that are nationally published, plus a number of the specific Railroad Historical Society journals, etc., official guides, you name it. We even entertain questions from afar, and so far nobody's been able to stump us, so we're very proud of that. We have enough resource.
And behind us, of course, while the older folk perhaps are going to the reference library, we can let the younger folk play around with this model train set.
Yes, these are on loan from The Northwoods Flyer Collection, it's the collection of Greg Turinetti, who's an expert in American Flyer antique trains. And so Greg has donated these. They've been here for several years. We don't know exactly when this is coming down, but probably within this summer or so.
Tell me the hours of the history center.
Right now, the museum is open 9 to 1 on Monday, Wednesday, and Fridays, or by appointment. So if, for instance, you're from out of town and you want to come to the museum and that doesn't work for you, call and make an appointment. Someone will come here and be with you. The hours may change in the summer, but that's what they are right now.
And if you viewers at home are thinking, okay, we learned everything about the Merrill History and Cultural Center, you are very wrong, Tom. There's a lot more stuff in here.
Yes, my theory is if you get in the door, you will love this place, because we've all spent a lot of time and effort collecting various collections about it.
Well, thank you for doing that. Definitely shows. Thank you for bringing me on the tour. Thank you to Pat and Bea as well. We'll be right back in Up North at 4.